All right, folks. So this afternoon, in the next hour or so, what we're going to do is look at the reign of Henry VIII and Elizabeth I, and get a general sense to put some context into Elizabeth I's reign that you're reading on the PDFs. Give you a sense of what else is going on in England at the time, and put things into a little bit of context for us. Okay, so when we present, here we go, the entire screen. Click share. All right, going back to Google Classroom, what I've just done is I posted two things here for you. We're going to go through the first one, the PowerPoint, on our own, which is the, or collectively, collaboratively, we're going to go through that. And then there is the note on Elizabeth, the Virgin Queen. So this note we're not going to get into today, but I'm just going to pull it up here for you really quick so you can have a look at it. This is the note that normally I would go through with the class. We would spend about a period on this, putting context into it and looking at it as we jumped into looking at a film version of Elizabeth I, which we're not going to do collectively as a group. But if you want to read through this on your own later on, this will help put into context some of the PDF readings that you're doing, and it links together the Protestant Reformation with Elizabeth I's reign. One thing I want to point out on these notes, whenever I post the notes for you, they'll have highlighted points on them, as you can see right there. The highlighted points are the key ideas. If this was a regular year and if we were going through, I'd have the note that would be up, you'd be jotting notes down on it, but let's say you missed class and you didn't know what I had done. This is in a Google Meet kind of way, so you wouldn't have a video to go back and watch. What I normally would do in the past is I would highlight the notes to let people know what the most important things were that we went through, that we talked about as a group, as a class. So as you go through there, you can see what the highlighted parts are. You can read those on your own later on. One thing I want to point out about Queen Elizabeth I, though, is that for our purposes in the story that we're telling from the Reformation or the Renaissance up to World War II, Elizabeth I is a nice bridge between the Reformation and the age of absolutism, because her reign comes out of the Protestant Reformation in the sense that what her father does in the 1530s is creates his own church. Uses the example of Martin Luther breaking away from the Catholic Church in 1517 with the Protestant Reformation. Henry VIII uses that as the launching point for the Anglican Church, or the Church of England, which he creates in the 1530s, puts himself at the head of the church. And so because he is a Protestant, because he's a reformer, that links Elizabeth I's reign back to the Reformation. But Elizabeth I, through the use of a thing called the Privy Council, which her father also used, and a legislative body called the Star Chamber, which sounds like it's something out of a Harry Potter book. But with the use of the Privy Council, with the use of the Star Chamber, Queen Elizabeth I amasses a tremendous amount of power for herself. And in doing so, she also provides a nice bridge then into the age of absolutism, which we're going to get into later on this week. Okay, so let's go back and look at this right here. We're going to do the PowerPoint together. If you would like to watch later on your own, because you are probably familiar with this, Henry VIII had 6 wives, divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. They're the most famous of all of the wives that Henry VIII had was probably Anne Boleyn. And Anne Boleyn is famously executed by Henry VIII. She is beheaded. So there's a video here from Daily Motion called The Execution of Anne Boleyn, which is from, if anybody in grade 10 remembers, the Days That Shook the World series that we used for the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The same series did a look at Anne Boleyn's last day. So that's what this is. This is the day before, the day of, rather, her execution for treason against Henry VIII. But you can watch that on your own later on. We don't need to worry about that. What we're going to look at today is this. Henry VIII. Okay, let's open up the Google Slides because it's easier to scroll through it. Are you going to open up or what? Well, maybe not. All right, we'll just go through it this way. That's fine. All right, so when we look at Henry VIII, this is a young picture of Henry VIII. His father, this is important to note about Queen Elizabeth I's reign. Queen Elizabeth is sitting on a very precarious throne when she becomes the queen in 1558. And the reason for that is England had just finished a civil war when her father becomes the King of England. So the Civil War, the English War of the Roses, is between two different groups of nobles. And the War of the Roses ends the reign of the Plantagenets. And that would be the group of people like Richard III. If anybody's ever read that Shakespearean play, he is a Plantagenet king. The Plantagenets then are defeated in the War of the Roses. And Henry VIII's father, Henry VII, also known as Henry Bolingbroke, Henry VII becomes the new King of England. He is not well liked by about half of the English nobility. Half of the English nobility did not support the Tudors. They supported the Plantagenets instead. And as a result, what you have then is a very divided country in the early 1500s. Henry VII, therefore, has to rule with a fairly brutal fist to make sure that he maintains control over the country of England. When Henry VII takes the throne after the War of the Roses, there's a number of things that you need to be aware of. England is financially a very weak country. There's not a whole lot of trade, not a whole lot of naval promise. There's no colonies for the British at this point. It's 1500. The first British colony, or the first British exploration, isn't going to happen until Giovanni Cabotti, or John Cabot, as we call him, is sent off by the English in the 1540s to explore Newfoundland. And so therefore becomes the first Northern European since the Vikings, really, to explore the coast of Newfoundland. But still, we're looking at 100 years away from the first British colony. So Henry the VIII becomes the king in 1509. Almost 100 years later, in 1607, is when you'll have the first British colony of Virginia founded, followed by Massachusetts in 1615. So we're 100 years away from the British Empire. England is very, very weak economically, very, very weak politically, very, very weak militarily. As well, like I said, there's a divided throne. And on top of that, the English are surrounded by a number of enemies. And let's just swing the camera over here really quick for a second. Let's put the camera over there onto the map. Oh, jeez, what happened there? What's that? Hi, everybody. Hold on a second. Let's fix that. You guys all went for a ride there. All right. Stop camera. Okay, here we go. Let's see if that's going to work. Let's go back to here. What is going on with the camera now? Stop presenting. I don't know what happened there. Let's change the camera and then see what happens. Here we go. Video. Go back to this one. Okay, let's go to this. Wow, I don't know what happened there. Anyway, let's go to this. We'll go to the map and we'll go from this camera, and then I'll see if that one's going to work again later on. England is right here, okay? Again, at the risk of insulting your intelligence, here's England. England in 1509 is surrounded by enemies. So let's go back where we talk about the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire is this middle part of Europe right here. The middle part of Europe, which is present-day Germany, Austria, part of Poland, part of the Czech Republic, part of Slovakia, part of Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, Northern Italy, Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Belgium. All of those territories right here are all the Holy Roman Empire. If you remember, in 1517, there is a very powerful Holy Roman Emperor by the name of Charles V. Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, is a very, very strong leader, very ruthless leader, and maintains control over the Holy Roman Empire with an iron fist. At the same time as Charles V is in control of the Holy Roman Empire, you also have Ferdinand and Isabella, who are in charge of Spain. Spain down here is a Catholic country. France right here is a Catholic country. And in the early 1500s, France is going through its own civil war as well, but Catholic. Holy Roman Empire, Catholic, and so on. So England finds itself under, when Henry VIII first becomes the king, surrounded by enemies. Spain controls the New World by this point in time, 1492. Christopher Columbus has sailed off across the ocean blue. So Spain is getting all kinds of money coming in now from the New World, from the destruction of the Mayans, the destruction of the Aztecs, the destruction of the Incas, and they're bringing back these boatloads of silver, which is completely changing the European economy. Spain is very, very powerful. Spain is allied with the Holy Roman Empire, which controls the coast directly across from England. So Charles V, ruthless, control of the Holy Roman Empire, also related to Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain. The French are enemies of the Spanish and enemies of the Holy Roman Empire. The French at this point in time also control Scotland in the north. So England, just the country of England and Wales, is surrounded to the north by the Scottish, who are allied with the French, to the south by the French, to the east by the Holy Roman Empire, who is allied with Spain to their south. So there's not a whole lot of allies for the English at this point. Henry VIII really can't afford to antagonize a lot of them, which is why Henry VIII marries the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, who is Catherine of Aragon. So in order to ally himself with the continent, give himself a supporter, a protector, an ally, he marries into the family of Spain and the Holy Roman Empire to ally himself against the French and against the Scottish. Okay? Where did my remote? There's this. Let's see if this other microphone's working. I don't know. No, I don't think it is because it's doing a weird thing. Let's undo that. Put it back in. See if that'll load back up. Oh, there we go. Maybe that's going to work now. We're back. Okay. I can't wait to watch that on video. That was probably fairly amusing. All right, let's go back here then. Yeah, there you go. Let's go back and look at this PowerPoint here, this tab. Okay. I know I'm presenting to everybody. All right. So, Henry VIII in a tough spot when he becomes the king. So marries Catherine of Aragon, the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella. Now, one quick little thing about this. Catherine of Aragon was married, she was married to Henry VIII's older brother, Arthur. So he marries his brother's widow, which, again, to us may seem really bizarre, incestuous, awkward, not at all appropriate or polite. Keep in mind that at this point in time, rich people did not marry for love. Rich people married for one of three things: power, money, or land. That's what you married for. And by power, I mean a title. So to become the Duke, or to become an Earl, or to become whatever. So to elevate the family, that's why you married. So his brother, Arthur, who was supposed to be the king, died 7 years earlier, being married to Catherine of Aragon. We're not quite sure whether or not they consummated their marriage, because Arthur died fairly soon after the marriage, so they may or may not have consummated the marriage. But the important thing is here is that Catherine of Aragon is married to Henry VIII, and she gets pregnant because they do consummate their marriage, but then she has 3 stillborn children and 2 infants that die in under a month of being born. So 5 children she has that all die, one after the other, after the other, after the other. Finally has 1 living child who was born, a daughter by the name of Mary. Now, for Henry VIII, what this is a sign to him. It's a sign that his marriage is cursed. It's a sign that he is disobeying the will of God. Because it says somewhere, I think it's in the book of Leviticus, that he who lays with his brother's wife shall till a barren soil, something like that. Which means that if you are sleeping with your brother's wife, you're not going to have viable offspring. Why does this factor in for Henry VIII? Keep in mind, that by the time we get to the 1530s, okay, so Catherine's had her 5 dead children and then has Mary. Henry desperately needs a boy. He has to have a male heir. And the reason for this, of course, is not because women couldn't inherit the throne, but because women were not considered as strong rulers as males. And coming out of the English Civil War, Henry desperately needed to maintain his control on the throne. Any little reason why the nobles who were allied with him might want to break away from Henry would be problematic for him. So to have just a girl that takes over the throne after him doesn't really put him and the throne into a good position. On top of that, infant mortality, as indicated by the fact that Catherine's had 5 children die, infant mortality is very high. So one child, not very good. You need to have multiple children. You need to have lots of backups just in case children die, which they are going to do, and they do in large numbers. Problem is, by the time that Mary is born, Catherine of Aragon, who is older than Henry VIII, now is done having children. She goes into menopause, she becomes sterile, and now Henry VIII, by the time we get to the 1530s or so, is really into a tough spot because he needs to have more children. His wife can't have them. English Civil War, women shouldn't be inheriting the throne, all kinds of things. To make things more difficult for Henry, he is now caught the attention of, or rather, a girl has caught his attention. Anne Boleyn, an 18-year-old courtier who is there, who is actually one of his wife's ladies-in-waiting, is quite attractive and quite beguiling, and Henry starts to write very sexy love letters to Anne Boleyn, which, by the way, all still exist, and you can read them if you like. They're in the Royal Archives. You can find them online. Henry VIII wrote a lot of pretty straightforward letters to Anne Boleyn, saying exactly what he wanted to do with Anne Boleyn. Now, for Anne Boleyn, she was a woman of character, and she wasn't about to get married to Henry VIII unless she had all the trappings that came with marrying Henry VIII, which means she wanted to be the queen. And Henry's like, well, listen, baby, you don't have to be the queen in order to get all the benefits. Like, I'll put you up in a palace, and I'll give you servants, and I'll give you all kinds of money if you just sleep with me. And Anne Boleyn says, I don't see no ring on this finger, and refuses to marry Henry VIII until she can become the queen. Well, this is a problem for Henry, because he's desperate to have more children. He is desperate to marry Anne Boleyn. He's desperate to sleep with Anne Boleyn, and really needs a change in his marital situation. Problem, he's Catholic. And being Catholic, you're not allowed to get a divorce. Well, it just so happens, conveniently enough, 1527, we're 10 years into the Protestant Reformation. So Martin Luther has inspired Calvin, and inspired Zwingli, and inspired Jan Hus, and inspired a lot of other people to break away from the Catholic Church and to reinterpret the religious traditions or religious rules of the day for their own reasons. Henry VIII looks at that and thinks, yeah, you know, it's not a bad idea. What if I broke away from the Catholic Church, made my own church, then I can make the rules. Now, remember, Holy Roman Empire, you got 2 people in charge, the Emperor, Charles V, and a Pope. By this point in time, Leo X is dead. The new Pope, Clement VII, also a weakling, feckless, completely under the thrall of Charles V, who is a very ruthless ruler, as we've already talked about. So Clement is desperate not to have Henry VIII break away, because there's all kinds of countries and cities that are breaking away from the Catholic Church at this point, but also desperate not to offend Charles V, who is the nephew of Catherine of Aragon. So consider this, Henry VIII's wife is the aunt of the Holy Roman Emperor, who controls the Catholic Church. Puts Henry in a tough spot, puts the Pope in a tough spot, puts a lot of people in a tough spot. And Anne Boleyn is at the heart of all of this. Now, a couple of different things here. Okay, the Pope, desperate to keep Henry within the folds, actually goes so far as to offer him a number of very innovative solutions to Henry VIII's problem, which you wouldn't find any Pope of today offering to anybody to solve their problems. But for example, what the Pope says to Henry is, listen, you can't divorce Catherine of Aragon at all, because Charles will get very upset with this. And Henry, by the way, to his credit, does write a letter to Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor, and says, listen, I need to kick your aunt to the curb. Do you mind? Charles V writes back a letter in no uncertain terms saying, that's not happening. And again, remember the power balance. Charles V, Holy Roman Empire, powerful. England, not so powerful. The Pope says to Henry VIII, well, listen, why don't you just take Anne Boleyn as a mistress? Okay, so listen, I know you're still married to Catherine. Why don't you start stupping Anne, and then whatever children you have, I'll make them legitimate so they could, by papal authority, then they could inherit the throne. So Henry goes to Anne Boleyn and says, listen, I know you want to be the queen and make this all legit and so on and so forth, but how about you just sleep with me? And Anne slaps him across the face. Nope, that ain't going to happen. So fine, Henry goes back to the Pope, says that's not going to work. We need a better solution. So the Pope says, all right, I have it. What about if Catherine becomes a nun? Think about this. She becomes a nun. You can't be married to a nun. So that will allow me then to annul your marriage. She can go to a nunnery. That opens up the door to Anne Boleyn. You guys can get remarried. So Henry goes to his wife and says, listen, Catherine, baby, I know you're the mother of my child, and I know that you enjoy being the queen, but how would you feel about taking a vow of poverty and chastity and shaving your head in a vow of silence and going and living as a nun for the rest of your life so I can go shtup one of your ladies in waiting? You can imagine Catherine's kind of like, no, that's not going to happen. So he goes back to the Pope, says, no, she's not down for the nun thing. The Pope says, I got it. How about just in England, I make it legal for the king to marry two people. So I'll authorize bigamy. You stay married to Catherine, which makes Catherine and Henry and Charles very happy, and then you marry Anne Boleyn, and then everybody gets to have what they want. So Henry goes back to Anne and Catherine and says, like, how do you ladies feel about a little alternate living arrangement? At which point he gets a bit of a smack from both of them. That's not going to happen. Henry is stuck, which then prompts Henry VIII to break away from the Catholic Church, because the Pope can't solve his problems. Charles can't solve the problems. But if Henry is his own ruler, he doesn't need to listen to the Pope anymore. He doesn't need to listen to Charles anymore. So Henry VIII breaks away from the Catholic Church. And a bit of a push on this, by the way, is caused by the fact that Anne Boleyn's morality breaks down, and Anne Boleyn sleeps with Henry VIII in 1532. 1532. She gives in. And by the way, she gave in for a palace, for an annual fee or an annual pension of, in present day, about $6 million a year. The title of Marchioness, which is a fairly powerful title. It'd be as if she was a daughter of a marquis. So she has a price after all, and it isn't a ring on her finger necessarily. She breaks down. Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn do what it is that people do. And again, talk to a biology teacher, and she gets pregnant. Yay for Henry! She's pregnant. Problem for Henry, he's still married to Catherine, and he's got to get Catherine out the way, get Anne in the door before she gives birth to her kid, because the kid's got to be legitimate. So, 1533, Henry VIII breaks away from the Catholic Church, creates the Church of England just in time for Anne Boleyn to give birth to another girl. Henry's ticked about that, folks. Very, very very upset. And he blames Anne Boleyn for this. Okay, let's go back here for a quick sec. He blames Anne Boleyn for having a girl. He says, how can you do this to me? Listen, I married you because I needed you to give me a boy. I was very clear on that. I gave you the palace, and I gave you the money, and I gave you the title, and you didn't deliver on your side of the deal. Now, why is he blaming Anne for this? Conventional wisdom in the 1500s said that babies came out of men fully formed. So, I mean, again, don't forget, microscopes aren't invented until the early 1700s. So we can't see eggs and sperm. We don't know that. People are aware, of course, that what comes out of the guy and the girl then creates babies. The conventional wisdom was that the baby came out of the guy fully formed. Well, why is this Anne Boleyn's fault then? Because Henry says, listen, I'm only doing boys. That's what I'm preparing, okay? Imagine it's like a world-class chef who creates a cake and then gives you the cake. All you have to do is put it in the oven at the right temperature and watch it so it doesn't get burned. Don't open the door, the cake will fall. Your job, this is what they believed women's jobs was to simply incubate this already intact baby. So if Anne Boleyn gave birth to a girl, clearly she didn't have the oven set to the right temperature. It's her fault. She screwed it up. Henry is furious with Anne Boleyn. So furious, in fact, that he can't even stand to look at her anymore. Henry doesn't spend any time at all with Queen Elizabeth I, or Princess Elizabeth, as she is known at this point. Really spends very little time with his daughter at all. He doesn't even much like her because she is a constant reminder of the fact that his wife screwed up in having a child. Now, Henry decides, that's it, I'm done, I'm getting a new wife, because the first one, Catherine, who, by the way, is still living in the palace. So Henry divorces her, but doesn't kick her out of the palace. She still lives there. So she's still living in the palace with Henry and his new wife, and with her first child, Catherine, and with Anne's new child, Elizabeth. So that's got to make breakfast awkward, right? When you say, hey, honey, please pass the sugar, and neither one of the girls is quite sure who you're talking to, and it's awkward. So Henry decides, I'm getting rid of Anne, because Anne has betrayed me, and I got to find somebody else. But he doesn't want another divorced ex-wife living in the palace. It's already crowded with Catherine there and with Anne. So he decides, easiest way to get rid of Anne Boleyn, have her killed. But the King of England can't just kill somebody. You've got to have a reason to do that. Well, what possible reason could he have to kill Anne Boleyn? Treason. She committed treason. How did she commit treason? Well, he comes up with a bunch of stuff, and he actually has one of his guys, his legal authority, Sir Thomas More, come up with all kinds of rationales for why Henry could actually have Anne Boleyn killed. But one of the reasons is that he accuses her of adultery. He says that she was sleeping with her cousin, and that's why she has committed treason. But that's not really the reason. By the way, she wasn't sleeping with her cousin. She was actually very faithful to Henry VIII. She has committed treason, though, according to Henry VIII, because she has betrayed the king. He gave her a job. The job was, I'll give you the palace, I'll give you the title, I'll give you everything. You got to deliver the boy. And she didn't do it. She betrayed the king's confidence. She betrayed the king's... Are we getting raided? Sorry? Somebody was just talking there. So she needs to be killed. So Anne Boleyn is executed. Princess Elizabeth then goes and lives with foster parents for probably about the next, what is she, 5 when her mother is killed. She lives with foster parents until she's about 19 years of age. The Seymours, Thomas Seymour, and his family. So that then brings us to Henry VIII marrying his next wife. Here we go. Okay. We don't need to worry about that. Okay. So 1536, Anne Boleyn is executed, and Henry VIII marries his next wife by the name of Jane Seymour. This woman right here. Jane Seymour, as part of the wedding vows, by the way, she promises to be buxom and bonaire in bed, which means she promises to do all the things Henry wants her to do in order to have a boy. Henry marries her. She gives birth to a boy. Woo! Henry gets what he needs. 1537, Edward is born. Nice! Henry now has what he needs. He's got a boy, a couple of girls that are extras. Things are good. The problem is twofold, though. One, Edward, this young boy who's just been born, is very, very sick, very weak, and he will remain sick his entire short life. He will only live until about the age of 18, and then he dies. So he's not well. And as many of you know, the English climate, cold, damp, rainy, not great for a kid with underdeveloped lungs and so on, which is what Edward has. So this kid might not survive until Henry dies to become the King of England. And even if he does, he might not last that long. Henry needs more kids. Not a problem, because Jane Seymour just delivered on the boy, right? So that's good. We'll just have more kids with Jane Seymour, except for the fact that Jane Seymour dies giving birth to Edward. So now, Henry's got a divorced, a beheaded, and a died. He's got a daughter and a sick little boy. So he needs to marry again. So he decides to reach out at this point in time. He's broken his relationship with Charles V. He's broken his relationship with the Catholic Church. So he decides to reach out then to the Protestants in northern Germany and marries a woman named Anne of Cleves. That's this beauty right here, Anne of Cleves. Problem with this is that Henry VIII is not terribly enthralled by Anne of Cleves' appearances. He sees her and agrees to marry her sight unseen. He just sees a picture of her, this picture, and thinks, all right, she's not bad. She's not a great looker, but she's not bad. And he agrees to marry her without having seen her. Well, when she arrives in 1540 to marry King Henry, King Henry goes down to the docks to meet her, and she gets off the boat, and he's like, hey, hello, you, good Lord. Oh, sure. Because this picture was the 16th century equivalent of photoshopped. This is not what Anne of Cleves looked like. Anne of Cleves was apparently quite homely, to be polite about that. And Henry, in fact, is so, he marries her because he agreed to marry her, but he can't even bring himself to consummate the marriage. He's like, I just, can't do it. So marries her, but then very quickly decides, that's it, I'm done, divorces her. She only lasts a couple of months. Now he's got a divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, marries again, still needs another kid. Who does he marry? In this case, he marries a woman named Catherine Parr, right here. Catherine Parr just happens to be the first cousin of Anne Boleyn. And I don't know for the life of me why she would agree to marry Henry VIII. Folks, if someone comes up to you and offers to marry you, okay, guys or girls that are listening to this, if somebody comes up to you and offers to marry you, and that person had previously been married to your cousin, who they had murdered for no reason, no legitimate reason, and then they come up to you and say, want to get married? I would strongly suggest you don't marry that person because they've got a track record of killing your cousin. Catherine Howard, when Henry VIII comes up and says, want to get married, goes, sure, and marries Henry VIII. I don't care. Now, Anne Boleyn was not cheating on Henry VIII. Catherine Howard was cheating on Henry VIII. She is, as the French ambassador writes, dangerously unfaithful to Henry VIII. And the French ambassador also writes, by the way, that when this teenage girl marries Henry VIII, because she's in her late teens, she is a rose without a thorn, meaning she's not a virgin when she marries Henry VIII. She wasn't a virgin before she married Henry. She did not stay faithful to Henry. She was sleeping with loads of people. It doesn't take Henry long to figure that out, and in a rage, and probably predictably so, Henry has Catherine Howard executed for treason. So there's your divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, and now we have one more to go. By the way, Henry VIII is so angry about the fact that his non-virgin wife was cheating on him that he actually had it written into the English law that it was illegal for any woman who is not a virgin to marry the King of England, which the same French ambassador who called her a rose without a thorn snidely commented would pretty much exclude every woman in the English court. But this law, just a little side note for all of you royal watchers out there, all you William and Kate fans and so on, this law is still on the books, which means that theoretically, had William been the king before he married Kate Middleton, she would have had to have undergone a physical examination to prove that she was still a virgin in order to legally marry the king. Now, he's a prince, so she can marry him, and so we don't know what their story was. But had he been the king, this law is still on the books. She would have had to have undergone a proof of virginity in the English law code. So it's one of these weird things that even though we are 5 centuries away from Henry VIII's time, and even though we're living in a fairly modern time, there are still some really archaic rules that are on the rule books. Anyway, getting back to our story of the 6 wives, the last wife of Henry VIII is a woman named Catherine Parr. He married a lot of Catherines. He liked the name Catherine, liked the name Anne. Catherine Parr is really more of a nursemaid than a wife for Henry VIII. By this point in time, by the late 1540s, Henry VIII has got gout. He is quite unwell. He's got ulcers. He's got a tremendously bad flatulence problem. He is ailing in lots and lots and lots of ways, and dangerously morbidly obese by this point. And in 1547, after 40 years on the throne, Henry VIII, who was fairly beloved by his people, dies, and now leaves the crown to his son, his only boy that he had. He's got 3 children, so his last 3 wives didn't give him any more children. Anne or Catherine. So he's only got the 3 kids, Edward and Mary and Elizabeth. When he dies, the crown passes to young Edward, who becomes Edward the 6th or 7th. I think it's Edward the 6th, who's right here, okay? Edward the 6th was raised staunchly Protestant by his advisors, and his advisor, his religious and spiritual advisor, by the way, was a man named John Knox. So if anybody here is Presbyterian, Presbyterianism was founded by John Knox, who was a Scottish clergyman. So he becomes the spiritual advisor for young Edward and raises Edward to be very, very, very Protestant. And so Henry was Catholic. So Henry's Catholic, converts to the Anglican Church, which is very close to Catholicism, by the way. If anybody here is Anglican, you're pretty close to Catholic. There's only 3 big differences between the Anglican Church and the Catholic Church in particular. One is that the Pope is the head of the Catholic Church. The Archbishop of Canterbury is the head of the Anglican Church. 2, the Catholics venerate the Virgin Mary, so they pray to the Virgin Mary with the Hail Mary prayer. Anglicans don't, and unless you are high Anglican, you don't kneel at the at prayers like the Catholics do, the standing and the kneeling. High Anglicans do, but regular Anglicans don't. But that's really it. Essentially, the prayer book remains roughly the same. The hymns are roughly the same. There's very little difference. Remember, Henry VIII creates the Catholic Church, Anglican Church primarily so that he can divorce his wife. It's not really because he has any problems with Catholicism. Edward, though, is very, very Protestant, and so he begins to write the Anglican Book of Prayer, which he completes, which adds a few more big differences into the Anglican rules. He dies, though, like I said, only being on the throne for about 5 years because he's always been unwell, remains unwell, dies at a fairly young age, and the throne then passes to his eldest sister, Mary. Now, Mary, remember, was a daughter of Catherine of Aragon, who was Catholic. So Mary has been raised Catholic by her mother. She is very, very Catholic, and by the time she becomes the queen, she is also married to King Philip II of Spain. So she is the wife of the Spanish king and now becomes the Queen of England at the same time. Because she is staunchly Catholic, remember, Henry VIII's father was, and Henry VIII himself was Catholic, becomes Anglican. Edward drags us over to staunch Protestantism. Mary comes into the throne and drags England all the way back to Catholicism. She makes the Anglican Church illegal. She makes Protestantism illegal. She forces people to convert back to Catholicism, and those that refuse to do so, she has publicly executed for heresy, primarily by being burned at the stake. 3,000 people are killed under Mary, who only reigns for about 5 years as well, from 1553 until 1558. 3,000 people are killed by Queen Mary, which earns her the nickname, what?
Bloody Mary.
There we go. So this is Bloody Mary, who murders 3,000 people. When she dies in 1558, the crown now passes to the sole surviving child of Henry VIII, who has been raised away from her father, raised away from her sister, raised away from her brother, raised in a world that's very dangerous, having seen her mother executed when she was 5, having lived in a very perilous lifestyle, having been thrown in the Tower of London by her sister, potentially one step away from the hangman's noose or from the hangman's axe. She has been raised in a very precarious, very dangerous situation. In 1558, Queen Elizabeth I finally becomes the sole ruler of England. All of this is to say, folks. Oh, by the way, any questions just generally on that? On Henry VIII's life and how it is that England becomes Anglican and how Elizabeth comes to the throne? No? Any general questions on that? Okay. So, all of this is to say that Queen Elizabeth I, you can imagine, has had a rough childhood. She doesn't like a lot of people. She doesn't trust a lot of people. And she is determined when she sits on the throne that she will not be beholden to anybody else. She will not be beholden to a foreign suitor. She will not be beholden to a different country. She will rely on herself. She will trust herself and her instincts, because that's what's helped her survive her 25 years of life thus far. She was born 1533, and in 1558 she becomes the queen. So it's onto this throne that she becomes the queen. Her country is bankrupt. Her country is torn apart. Still, the anger and the mistrust from the War of the Roses, half the nobility don't really like her. They don't want the Tudors on the throne, and they certainly don't want a Tudor girl on the throne, especially a Tudor Anglican girl, because half the nobles are also Catholic. So you've got this country that is poor, that is divided militarily, that is divided economically, that is divided religiously, and she has to somehow bring all of this together and survive at a time when half the people don't really want her there, and they don't really trust the Tudor name because Mary has been burning people left, right, and center. So this is kind of the context for the beginning of Elizabeth I's reign, right? Perilous situation for a young 25-year-old girl to be sitting on the throne trying to make these decisions. But between 1558 and 1603, she will survive no less than 7 assassination attempts and turn England into what some historians have called the beginnings of the greatest empire in the history of the world. Is it really the Golden Age? This is now your task to try and figure that out. That's some context for it, to look at how Elizabeth comes into the throne, why and how she is struggling to sort of maintain control, and some of the perils she's going to have later on. Gives you some context for some of the readings that we want to do. For the remainder of the day, folks, it's nearly 12:20. What we're going to do is, for the remainder of the day, I'm going to give you time to continue reading those PDFs and to continue investigating the reign of Elizabeth I. What I strongly recommend that you do, though, before you go back to the PDFs, is now flip over to that note that I just posted for you on the Google Classroom. Read that note because it will give you some context as well for some of the PDFs and help you understand them a little bit better. All right? Before I let you go for the remainder of the day, any questions on the reign of Henry VIII, Edward, Mary, how Elizabeth comes into the throne? Any questions, folks?
I actually had a question about the assignment.
Yeah, good.
Like, but like, should we have had any sort of like start to it or anything like that done by today, or is today sort of just like read up on the information kind of?
Yeah, today's read, you start to make sense of the readings. Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah, so you've got until Friday to hand it in. And again, it's only a 3-page essay. So if you, for those of you, again, it's a great question. You know, where should I be at what point in time? I would say by tomorrow night, for sure, you should have all the PDFs read and you should have a good idea of whether or not you're going to say, yes, it was a golden age, or no, it wasn't. And you should have a good handle on some of the information. Wednesday, you want to continue with your research and maybe start doing a little bit of writing. By Thursday, you definitely need to be into the writing phase. But today, just research. Yeah, great question. Any other questions, folks? No? Okay, then I will let you go. You've got the remainder of the day to continue to read the PDFs on Queen Elizabeth I. Any questions at all, folks? Send me an email. I'm happy to jump onto a Google Meet. I'm happy to answer any questions you've got at any point in time. Don't sit there and flounder and worry about what's going on, not knowing what you're doing. Ask me a question. I'm here to help you out. You are of no bother to me. I'm happy to help. Okay? Rest of the day, get back to the readings on the PDFs. We will see you tomorrow morning at 8:30 for a Google Meet. Bye.
So,
Yeah.
Elizabeth is like the last child that Henry had left. If she had also like died somehow, who would the crown have gone to?
Great question.
Brother?
So, and she doesn't marry.
Her brother died.
Yeah, she doesn't marry, so she's the last of the Tudor kings. There's only 5 Tudors: Henry VII, Henry VIII, Edward, Mary, and Elizabeth. So she is the last of the Tudors. She does have cousins, though, and her first cousin is Mary, Queen of Scots. So Mary, Queen of Scots is married to the French, a French prince, and Mary, Queen of Scots has a son by the name of James. When Elizabeth realizes, and she realizes by around, now, historians, by the way, debate when it was Elizabeth decided not to marry. Because she certainly used her marriage potential and her virginity and so on and so forth. She used that as a bargaining tool with France and with Spain, with a number of different countries who all sent suitors to her and tried to marry her and so on. So she toyed with the idea of marriage for quite a long time, at least in public, but she never marries. So she dies childless, unmarried. I would argue, though, that she had already decided at the very start of her reign she was never going to get married for 2 reasons. One, she's certainly been raised in a family where marriage is not exactly that safe a prospect, considering the fact that one of her stepmothers was beheaded, another one of her stepmothers died in childbirth, her own mother was murdered by her father, and so on. So I think she had a very healthy skepticism of marriage. And she, in 1559, said in a speech to Parliament that she would be happy if, at the end of her reign, her tombstone read, "Here lies the Queen of England, who lived and reigned and died a virgin." So she said that in 1559. By 1579, she goes into menopause. She's in her late 40s at that point. She's unable to have kids. So this is when she starts to plan for the succession. So who's going to be the next monarch? And she does this in a couple of different ways. One that's fairly ingenious. She gives a lot of the jobs of running England to a lot of the nobles. So the Duke of Suffolk, the Duke of York, the Duke of Cornwall, and so on are all given important jobs. So like Chancellor of the Exchequer, so the guy who's in charge of the budget. The person is put in charge of the military. A person is put in charge of infrastructure and roads, and so on. So these would all be positions that we in our modern time would look at as cabinet positions, right? For the Prime Minister of England, the Prime Minister of Canada, President of the United States has got a cabinet, right? So you've got a Secretary of Defense, a Secretary of War, a Secretary of this, a Secretary of that. Queen Elizabeth did that with her Privy Council. So she gave all of these nobles key jobs. And the reason why they all did the jobs to the best of their ability was because she essentially implied to them that it would be a long-term job interview. So whoever does the best at their job will get to be the next monarch after this. It was also ingenious, by the way, because if anything went well for Queen Elizabeth I, so if the standard of living went up, or if life expectancy went up, or people had more food, or whatever, who got the credit for it? Elizabeth, right? Even though she wasn't doing the work, somebody else was doing the work, but she got the credit for it because it was her idea to put the Duke of Cornwall in charge of crops. If something went badly, however, so let's say that there was a crop failure, well, then Elizabeth I would say, that's not my fault. I put the Duke of Cornwall in charge of that. Then she would fire the Duke, hire somebody else. So she would always have this plausible deniability. Anything that went wrong, not my fault. Anything that went well, I did that. So she uses all these nobles. Remember, the nobles, half of them don't really like her. She uses the nobles. She keeps them close to her, doing these jobs as sort of a job audition. However, she is planning on not giving the crown to any of them because by this point in time, she has imprisoned her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots, on potential charges of treason, which she will eventually execute her cousin, Mary, Queen of Scots, for treason, trying to overthrow Queen Elizabeth I. And as a result, when her cousin is imprisoned, her son, James, who is Scottish and being raised by his Scottish Catholic mother, is now taken by Queen Elizabeth I and raised to be an Anglican. He's brought down to England. He is raised as an Anglican. And when Mary, Queen of Scots, is executed in 1588, James becomes James VI of Scotland. And when Elizabeth I dies in 1603, she leaves the English throne to James VI, who now becomes James I of England, uniting the English throne and the Scottish throne together for the first time in under one person in history, where it's remained, by the way, since 1603 until just recently. There was an election just this past week in Scotland. The Scottish Independence Party is now in charge, so we may see Scotland leave England for the first time. But that's the plan. Her plan by the 1570s is to put James on the throne, unite the two crowns together, and unite the two countries. That would alleviate the problem of the French in the north and the Scottish in the north, and allow England just to focus on threats from the south. Good question. Anybody else? No? Okay. All right, then, folks, I'll give you the remainder of the time today to work on your readings, get going on those PDFs. Again, any questions that you've got, don't hesitate to reach out. I am here all day to assist. Okay? Stop recording.